Sup Shredders, my name is Logan aka Spiderhands and welcome to an SP Patrons video today that I make for BranSi0730 ZHANG as part of their custom monthly music review. And if we switch over to here, we have ourselves a track on the screen. This is from an act named Coldplay, titled Hymn for the Weekend. Now if I'm not mistaken, I think that this track, it may or may not feature BranSi. Now apparently Coldplay are doing a few concerts this month. Yeah, it's Coldplay month in Singapore, so they're quite busy over there at the moment, which is awesome. It's good to hear they're gigging, but we're going to be listening through this track from start to finish. And we're going to hear what we think. Let's go. Make it big. There we go. And we think we should be good. Really pretty with the bird songs. Gorgeous vocal harmonies. Love the automation of the volume there. Great use of bouncy keys and claps. I started a little bits of detail with like the repeaters going out to the sides of the stereo field with the delays there and that falsetto. Are they playing bottles? Great sort of emphasis in our blowing. It's an interesting story. It does kind of make you want to celebrate the weekend. That kind of party aesthetic. Great layering here with the both takes. So is this song talking about the wanting to get sort of like drunk and high on the weekend, that angel being the weekend coming down, sort of like pour that on you? Is that it? It's just like that further separation there, having the vocals in the center with just BranSi there for a moment, then Chris Martin coming in, then like opposing each other. It's just the sound design choices are sensational here. I'm actually really happy with it. Given the simplicity of the motif and the message. And have things go into that higher element there. Like you are soaring through the skies with the pitch. Interesting use of vocal delays on that. It's a great way to give more power to the vocals, to have the singer have that feedback there on the quarter notes. I think the track is well fleshed out. I'll talk about it more in the conclusion, but I think this is one of the first Coldplay songs that I think I've genuinely enjoyed. Because welcome to the conclusion of my review of this track from an act named Coldplay, titled Hymn for the Weekend, featuring Beyonce, even though it does not say featuring Beyonce on the title of the Spotify file, which I think, if I'm honest, is kind of gross. But moving on from that, you should always mention featured artists. I think it's really important to do that so that people know who else is involved. Beyonce is not a part of Coldplay, but anyways, I suppose you could also sort of suggest that Beyonce is so well known that automatically you'd know who she was. But anyways, by hearing her. But the song, I think it's about sort of praying to the God up high to get to the weekend, to get us so drunk and high so that we can kind of soar and really sort of oscillate in that upper register there, kind of leave the world we're in and go somewhere else. I think it's that kind of wish to be delivered from that. I think that that's an interesting story. I'm sure that there's a lot of people will be able to relate to that. I mean, it's the weekend just about now for me, so I mean, I can fully sort of like appreciate that. I think if I was also to sort of like mention how the vocals were done here, I thought that Chris Martin did a great job of sort of expressing himself in his typical sort of range there. Solid control of head and chest voice there. The performance was very clean. There were some really sort of seamless transitions there, which I appreciated. I think it made the track more interesting having Beyonce and there was an alternate lead there, especially with the kind of build in the starting part where we're kind of overlapping lines and kind of creating this interesting aesthetic with like the bird sounds and stuff like that, to kind of get into a bigger song and kind of be that hymn for the weekend and such, to build into that march there. I think it was kind of dope there. Beyonce's lead line's over top in a higher register than Chris Martin's, even though he's quite high, both in vocals and also within the track. They niched together nicely within the frequency spectrum. It was also the fact that we had them together sometimes on opposite sides of the stereo field. Occasionally that overlap. I think that Beyonce had the interlude there after Chris Martin's, like choruses and verses, and we had Beyonce come in on top as well with the second verse. There is interplay and a respectful amount of space that each other sort of provide each other whilst also coming together really sweetly. And a track where there's a lot of pretty elements involved and I want to sort of provide a sense of continuation for that. So ultimately, I can kind of understand how the vocals are done. There's enough variation to keep the song palatable and interesting throughout there. And I think that, again, the vocals and lyrics sounded connected. But if we move on to the actual track itself at 4 minutes 18, it falls just outside of the 2 to 4 minute sweet spot, where 2 minutes is often a little bit too short to provide the sufficient amount of context to flesh out a track fully, unless, it's a short story. You go past 4 minutes and you really want that established motif to kind of be something that like really is intriguing enough to make it worthwhile listening through the whole thing. I think part of what made the song special was that we had that kind of interesting intro again with the bird sounds and like Beyonce kind of like hyping things up slowly, gradually with the automation of the vocals, or the volume of the vocals and the rest of the track there. That kind of made this track more of like 30 seconds of one thing and then 3.5 minutes of like the rest of the track, and allowed it to sort of be more palatable for that total 4 minutes 18. That's not to say that I dislike the track. I think that, again, like the development of the vocals, with the vocals being the focal point, made sense there. It was great to, I think, have trade-offs between Beyonce and Chris Martin. The song itself featured interesting sort of synth, bass, and drum ideas. I think there were also some occasional guitars there. There were some interesting sort of bodily kind of sounds there, with the bottles sounding like you're going to get drunk for the weekend. I thought that was a nice touch. So if I were to talk about, because the structure of the track isn't particularly interesting to me apart from the intro part going in, it's fairly sort of like typical of a lot of different sort of pop tracks similar within the genre there. With that extended outro though, with Beyonce finishing off things, considering the angel that she is, that was really, really wonderfully done. It was nice to just have her voice by itself. But like to talk about the instruments, I thought the percussion was great. it was nice to have a full sounding drum kit there that came in and sort of like slapped at the low end without being too abrasive. It provided an interesting sort of sense of movement there, pace in a minimalist way where we pocketed it, but it provided a nice ground bed for the other instruments to sort of lay on. The sort of like bottle percussion that we had, kind of working with sort of swing 16ths there, was snazzy as well. And it provided a sense of, it built on the existing melodies and harmonies within the track, also kind of making you imagine being at a party and playing with those bottles. The bass line was thoroughly thick when it came in as well. It was so full of life and vigor. The 808s were thick and full, and they had lots of room in the low end of the mix to sort of celebrate themselves and provide a sense of foundation for some of the mid to high range elements there. And I think that the keys, when they came in as well, were fantastically they were very chirpy. They weren't too melancholic. There was like a sense of joy with the weekend being here or being sort of drunk and high. I think a lot of that joy came from the synths that we had later on as well, especially when things got really sparkly near the end. We focused on flying through the stars and everything. So I think in essence, the track worked because of the later development of those synths inclusion there, making things all fuzzy and kind of feisty and kind of snazzy and sort of dazzling. There was an existing chord progression next and it was repeated throughout, and a lot of the strength came from not only how, we did vocals differently, but also how different instruments were implemented. We had varying intensities and dynamic range throughout the performance there, and nothing played too much there. We had, again, like the bottles had like a concept we explored. It was kind of like we had like little squares of ideas per instrument. We kind of like either looped them or we made very, very minor adjustments. We almost templated it, but in a way where it just kind of works for poppy music without too much sort of diffusion or variety in between that's unnecessary or distracting from the story that's being told. But I think there was enough repetition of the vocals to kind of get it stuck in your head in a way where you wouldn't forget the hook line that soon. I think that ultimately the theme of the track, with the slow build into the wonderment to the later stage, really did just kind of, it was like relatively, like it was, the theme was inoffensive. A lot of the joy came from the sounds, like the bottle sounds and stuff like that kind of made you imagine the weekend. It was a catchy, some of those vocal runs as well were like wonderful. Like I didn't know Chris would sound good sort of singing like that, but he did. He had some really high notes there, nice and strongly, in a way that gave a sense of oomph to the pack and wonderment. And I suppose there were just little bits of finesse there that made it a special experience, and again fleshed out that 4 minutes with a chord progression that was repeated, but sort of manipulated in a way that made sense. It made you kind of feel excited for the weekend, I suppose, that kind of fantasy of it. But aside from that, it's with a solid performance behind all that, the studio recording, mixing, and mastering was sensational. Really comfortable with the way that the vocals were done, both with the automation of the volume, with the vocals coming up at the start, as well as Beyonce and Chris Martin being sort of niched together later on, whether again together or with multiple overdubs or whatever, the harmonies and melodies. But it was also, again, the keys as like a sub layer and that mid-range filtered, with like the synths coming in and the bass and the drums and the bottles and all that. They were nicely sort of niched in the frequency spectrum with no weird resonant frequencies in the frequency spectrum there. Part of that is high pass filtering, but part of that is also knowing how to compose and arrange things in a way where sort of elements won't kind of take the mickey out of each other. It's about figuring all that stuff out in advance, and they managed to nail that aesthetic. And I think just finally, there was dynamic range. Things were not the same loudness all the time. It was nice to have the Foley, the birds at the start, as well as like a compositional device, but also it did kind of sound like you were in a forest listening to those kind of chants and stuff like that. It was nice to know without pumping, so the bus compression limiting was handled. Effectively, this is just a really strong track from Coldplay. Again, featuring Beyonce. I think that this track wouldn't have been as effective without Beyonce being involved. That's not to say that I think that they are lesser songwriters. I think that Coldplay have written some great tracks. I just feel as if without Beyonce, it wouldn't have had that extra high range sort of wonderment and razzle dazzle that it would have had otherwise. I think it would have. I think like there was just a lot of things that Beyonce did with little sort of vocal trills and melodies and like little tails and stuff like that and little flurries where even though she was pocketing a lot of the time, it kind of excelled in a space where I don't know if Chris Martin could have necessarily done that. And I'm glad that we added that little sort of extra bit of spice there to kind of make it awesome. But is my review of this track, Hymn for the Weekend by Coldplay. Hopefully you enjoyed it. If you did, please go check out their various social medias and Spotify page, and stay cool and stay safe. And please remember to support your local musicians and artists at this point in time, as they help more than ever thought crazy stuff going on in the world. And I'll catch you in the next XP Patrons video. Spiderhands out.